everyone. Very nice to not see you. I'm very excited about this afternoon. But I wanted to start by just saying and having a little expression of gratitude to SERA Architects and to everyone that has helped organize this event, and especially to you, Dave. And I'll pass it to you.
Oh, thank you, Carrie. You're too kind. We put this invite out to our, what I described to Paul as our extended networks. And I'm so excited by the group of friends that have taken time to join us. So this is people from my colleagues at SERA, from Building Green, a special group called the Sustainable Design Leaders, a broad range of people from the industry, professionals, government officials, some great folks from Sacramento and San Francisco, high school students from my local town here in Corte Madera. And we've got participants from around the world. So young and old, they're here. A couple of housekeeping tips. We've turned chat off because with the number of people that have registered, we thought that might be challenging, but we really do encourage you to submit questions. My colleague, Clark Brockman, many of you know Clark. He is going to be collecting those questions, and near the end of the session, he'll be sending us some prompts to harvest the best thoughts from those questions.
And those are, you do need to drop those into the Q&A section.
The Q&A, thank you.
Yep.
Sorry to interrupt.
This session is recorded, so we are going to be using this at a later date. We don't know exactly what that'll be for. There's a number of people that expressed interest and weren't able to join us. So with that, I'll just introduce myself. My name is David Johnson. I'm an architect and a planner. I'm a principal with SERA Architects. My career has enabled me to work with incredible clients and colleagues on really pioneering projects in sustainability. Regeneration is a word that I've been using for a while, but waiting for this book to come out that I was able to talk to Paul about some while ago while the thought was still coming together and he was writing on the book. Kira, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm a writer and a consultant. My consultancy is called Kira Gould Connect. I work with mostly architecture firms and others. I'm a senior fellow with Architecture 2030. I'm also a podcast co-host on Design the Future, and I co-authored Women in Green some years ago. I work with the AIA Committee on the Environment National Leadership Group, and I'm in Oakland, just so you know where I'm piping in from today. And I have the great pleasure to introduce Paul. We're so grateful to hear from you, Paul, today. The built environment community really has a special relationship, I think, with the term regeneration and a deep and long abiding interest in it. So this is an exciting moment for all of us. And I'm just going to do Paul's general bio for those who may not be quite familiar with his great reach and his long career. Paul is an environmentalist, an entrepreneur, and an author. He's one of the environmental movement's leading voices. He's the best-selling author of 8 books, which have been published in 30 languages. He's a renowned lecturer who speaks on the impact of commerce on the environment and has consulted with governments and corporations throughout the world. And with that, I think, Dave, you should kick it off with a question so we can hear from Paul.
Paul, so great to be here with you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's an important day for us.
Thank you.
We were reflecting that about 59 years ago yesterday, Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. And we reflect on all of that all of those years that you have focused on this. And some people may not know all of your work. And but your writings include natural capitalism, the economy, the ecology of commerce, blessed unrest, and drawdown, and now regeneration, ending the climate crisis in one generation, a new book and a website. I know we're going to talk about the website today. Can you share just a little bit for those that may be younger and may not know about your journey? Can you share a little bit about how you came to this place?
It's so interesting. Just before she died, Rachel Carson came to San Francisco giving, I think, her last lecture, next to last one. And David and Ann Brower, actually, who, basically David, who brought the SERA Club to to prominence and started two other NGOs. Actually took Rachel Carson out to the GGNRA, which was not the GGNRA at that time. I don't think it was, in a wheelchair, to show her the brown pelicans and coming through on the ocean, just 2 feet above the ocean and so forth. And I met David Brower when I was 10 years old in Yosemite, and there was this towering man above me, in Porcupine Flats. And I didn't know what he was or who he was. He seemed formidable anyway. And but his work in the SERA Club and where I grew up, I'm 5th generation Californian, had a huge influence on me. Growing up at that time, I just thought everybody was an environmentalist. I really did. I just thought that's what everybody did on weekends, and went rock climbing, had Boda bags with wine, and ate Ritz crackers with kipper sacks and stuff. I really thought this is the world I was brought up in. But I think prior to that, and don't feel sorry for me, but when I say this, but growing up in my home was a dangerous place. It was not a cool place, my house where I grew up, and I wasn't safe there. And so what I did, though, was go outside every moment I could, and I felt safe outside always to this day, And so, and what's so interesting is it's true if you're an adult, but especially true if you're a child. A child can master the inside of a home within an hour, refrigerator, TV, light switch, bathroom, whatever. But when you go outside, nothing, and there's sounds and leaves and these berries edible and things that crawl away under the rocks, and you're just in a wonderland of things you do not know. And the names of, or what they do, or, are they good? Are they not so good? Are they, pick them up, you look at them, butterflies, all that sort of stuff. And what that developed in me was a sense of curiosity, just like, what is that? And what's the name? And how does it work? And, doing, I guess, what people did, which is eating things or trying to eat things and going and spitting it out mostly. But, that doesn't taste good. But I feel like that's really where my writing and my work comes from, is those early days, and then sort of being thrust into the world we all live in. But it's just as odd then in some ways as it is now economically, which is being thrust into an extractive economy that basically takes life, and that was kind of a whoa, I didn't understand it. It didn't make sense to me, and it actually doesn't make sense to me to this day.
That's that transition that we're in from extractive to regenerative, I know is so key to the book. Could you take a couple minutes and describe for others the basic premise of the book and the website?
Sure. Regeneration, I define it in the first sentence. It means putting life at the center of every act and decision. Okay, we'll go back to that. We live in an amazing economy in terms of its capacity to create capital and money and stuff, no question about it. But if we sort of follow the breadcrumb trail on every service and sector and business and product, that we engage in, and go back down the supply chain, we don't have to go very far before we find that it is taking life. It's the use of fossil fuels just to begin with. There you go. But in so many ways, it's taking life, and we become so inured to that as people. We accept that, and then, but taking life is harming life, and harming life is degeneration. That's what degeneration is re and D. And so we have a D economy, and it's kind of like we grew up with it. And then there was this whole movement starting in the 70s, to sustainability, which is really so well intended, but it was really about being less bad. In other words, don't be so bad, and we'll reduce how much bad or how much harm we're having. And again, fair play to everybody who got on that. Me too. I didn't ever use the word because I don't like the word, but I certainly supported those people, companies, and institutions that did. And the problem with that is that all it means is that if you're, so imagine ourselves in a car, going straight to a cliff. There's a cliff, we don't see it, we're going, and somebody says, slow down, slow down, slow down. I'm going, okay, we're still getting right over the cliff. And so sustainability does not take us to where we need to go, given where we are today. And so regeneration is really a 180 on that, which is, and it's a question too. It's not like fiat or I know you don't, listen up. It's just simply saying, what happens when we do a 180? Going, what would it mean to put life at the center of this decision, of this action, of this design, of this process, of this product, this relationship, it goes, you can put any noun you want in there and the question applies. And that's what the book is trying to open up, because regeneration is not a borrowed word. It's not a made up word in the sense of, oh, let's use that word, conceptually as a way to, measure our impact and all those kind of things. Regeneration is innate to being a human being. And all 30 trillion cells in our body are regenerating every nanosecond for everybody who's watching and listening, or we wouldn't be watching and listening. And so we're a walking regenerative, entity. And then if you look at our lives, the love we give to others, our children, the care we give to things, to people, to animals, to plants, to institutions, it goes on, and so forth. These are all regenerative acts, so we are innately regenerative. And I think really it's more like kind of waking up to like, whoa, we have been stealing the future. That's what we're doing. Degeneration steals the future because there's not as much life left for the next generation. And part of it is global warming. That's just by basically combusting, fossil fuels. Understood, got it, brought us a lot of good things too. It's not like black or white here. But the question for regeneration is, can we not heal the future and also produce an economy and GDP and prosperity and jobs? And my answer to that is, yeah, not only can we can do it, it'd be a lot more prosperous. It would encompass all of humanity instead of, the top 10% who basically emit 56% of all greenhouse gases.
Paul, I love hearing you talk about it like that. And it actually reminds me of conversations I've heard between you and Janine Benyus. And I think part of what was so inspiring about biomimicry for many of us in this industry was that very idea that we could focus design on creating conditions conducive to life, right? That was the center of that. And that's exactly why I think there's so much hunger for regeneration across the movement. I wanted to ask, though, a question about the relationship regarding the sequence and the relationship between Drawdown, your last book, and Regeneration, and how did you intend for us to understand that relationship between these two amazing books?
Sure, absolutely. Drawdown, the idea for Drawdown occurred to me in 2001, and that's when the third assessment of the IPCC came out. We're now at the sixth. It came out 3-4 weeks ago, maybe longer. I don't know. Anyway. I, was devoted to the environment all my life, and I didn't really understand climate. I understood the mechanism and so forth, but it really wasn't what I did. It was Bill McKibben and Al Gore and Jim Hansen and Catherine Hale. Other people seem to have this nailed, and so I didn't write about it so much. But when the third assessment came out, one thing puzzled me, which was that we did not have a list of climate solutions that were substantive, and we didn't have a goal. It's just so interesting. I was like, wait a minute, what's the goal here? And people are talking about mitigation. I'm an English major, and I don't think most people know what mitigation means. It doesn't mean to stop. It means to reduce the pain of something, or seriousness. And mitigating and tackling and combating, you know, fighting and all these war metaphors, and we know which gender those came from, you know. I mean, this is, I was like, come on. And verbs are not goals. And so I wanted to name the goal, and which is to reverse global warming. And that's why I use the term drawdown, which came from the climate literature, which means that first time when greenhouse gases peak in terms of emissions and go down on a year-to-year basis. And so that's the goal. And the question is, what can we do? What are we doing? You know, what do we know at that time that can we get there? Can we get there at all? Is it too late? I mean, all these questions came to mind. And I wanted to map, measure, and model the most substantive solutions to reversing global warming. It seemed like a good idea. And I wanted, just the same way I created, you know, Irvine, a natural food store, because I wanted to be the customer, not because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I wanted to be the customer of this data. I wanted to know it myself. And I asked NGOs and institutions and universities, friends that I had to, don't you think this is a good idea? And don't you want to do it? And, you know, and they said, it is a great idea, or it's a good idea, depending on who I was talking to. And we don't do that. We're not funded. We don't have the techniques. We don't have the models, etc. And why don't you do it? And I said, I wouldn't ask you if I knew how to do it. I would be doing it myself, you know. And that went for almost 12 years, really, until 2013, Kira, when Bill McKibben's piece came out, you know, global warming is terrifying in math. And what he did is he took the data from Mark Campanelli's work at Carbon Tracker in London that analyzed all the balance sheets of the coal, gas, and oil companies in the world and looked at the assets, you know, which is their reserves, and said, those aren't reserves and those aren't assets, because if we burn them, we'll be Venus. So how can you call that a financial asset? And what Bill did in his article for Rolling Stone is set a match to it. It was horrific. And Bill's good at that. It's just saying, look, you know, he's kind of like the prophet from, you know, coming out of the desert in the Old Testament, you know. I mean, and people came to me and said, it's game over, you know, wow, I'm gonna go to British Columbia, take my family, see if I can get a passport, whatever. they're like, I mean, they're just like, it's game over. And I just felt, when I heard that phrase again and again, I thought, wow, game over. It's actually I've never been an alcoholic yet. I mean, I still have time, but I have never been an addict, but I know that in AA and all the different 12-step programs, that I have had friends who belong to or been a part of, there's this thing when you surrender, actually, it's when you surrender and you give up is when things open up. And I felt like game over is like a surrender, and maybe it's game on. Maybe now it's game on, you know, as opposed to game over. And so with no money, well, the money I had was from my retirement plan, which I loaned, and then an Italian gave me some money to write another book, and I gave that money to Drawdown, and nobody would fund this. Nobody funds books. That's the thing. And then people even mocked us, made fun of us in the climate world, you know, the climate scientists, and it was painful, really, you know, you felt, because they were the scientists, we were not. But we went out to all around the world to 67, 8 people. Chad Frischman, my head of research, to look for Drawdown fellows, and he and Crystal Chazal basically managed these, and we created models, and we winnowed down a list of 200 some odd solutions, kept doing back of the napkin, then front of the napkin calculations until we knew which ones we were going to model. And that was the product of Drawdown. And what was so interesting is that in 2015, when we were in process doing this, we had staff that went to the Conference of the Parties in Paris, you know, the year before the Paris Agreement, but that at the party, Conference of the Party, and I had people going around asking people, what are the top 5 solutions to global warming, reversing global warming, or, you know, top 10, top 7, top 8. Nobody there. There's 35,000 people there that they found could name them.
Right.
I'm serious. And so Drawdown I did, but Drawdown was very siloed. It was modeling, it was numbers, it was metrics, and I wanted to do that because I felt that would be paid attention to. But even as I was writing Drawdown, I realized it just left out so much, and I decided I was going to write Regeneration, and Regeneration is very, very different. If you can look at Drawdown as maybe mechanistic or metrically, it's really about hard data, but Regeneration, so it's really about map, measuring, a model, and Regeneration is about the system, the whole.
Yeah.
And it's about act, protect, and connect. So they're both very, very valuable. But I think what Regeneration has is much bigger arms. It holds more. It holds everything that was in Drawdown, but much more besides that.
I really appreciate that it's action oriented, and it's action within reach and within what you love. When we came to the section of the book called "How to Read This Book," I was refreshed that you gave frameworks that gave people flexibility in which to act and to operate and to make a difference. But you started your frameworks with equity.
Yeah.
And it's so important to us right now and to our practice, and I know to many people on the line here. Why was equity number one?
Well, it pervades everything else. I mean, we kind of have a little bit of a narrative, if you will. And again, Al Gore was definitely one of the people who was very effective at this narrative, which is, I mean, for years, if we could just get solar, wind, and then later, if we had those two and Elon Musk and EVs, we'd get a hall pass to the 22nd century. It was like the whole thing was about CO2, about fossil fuels, and there was that sense, people thought, oh yeah, well, we got to do it. And I mean, we have to do that, no question about it, but without which we can't get there. But you just think of what was left out. Let's start with the gender, women. It's like left out. Indigenous people, culture, basically the biosphere. Shall I keep going? I mean, what was left out of that narrative was astonishing. And to me, it's still in the Bill Gates narrative, which is that the underlying assumption is we want to keep things as much as we can as they are, except we don't want to screw up the climate. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And if we get that right, then we can keep growing and in the way we are. And so no one was really looking at the nature of our activity, in a deeper way and what it was doing to life. The very fact that the Conference on Biodiversity and the Conference of the Parties met this year, or will meet, in two different places is crazy. They should be sitting on each other's laps. Right. And so to me, fairness, equity, is at the heart of it, because the narrative trope was a future existential threat. And this is what we face, and to me, that was so odd, because actually the brain doesn't respond to it. And that's been writ large by the fact that most of humanity has not responded to that, because our brains aren't wired for future existential threat. But much more importantly, the exclusion of that by the privileged, by the people who understood it, and again, well-intended, sincere, and we did, but I mean, it just left out most of humanity and most of, for that matter, life. There's nature, critters, creatures, and so fairness to me means living and being in such a way that everybody is kind of like, what if everybody did it? That maxim, and so it also it enlivens another thing what I talk about in the book, which is that if we're going to solve this, then we have to meet current existential needs.
Right.
And that is what 4.3 billion people face every single morning, every time they wake up. that is their life. And whether it's food or food security, whether it's security period, whether it's warmth or clothing or schooling or healthcare or jobs or income, I mean, you just go right down the list, you know, and that's the bulk of humanity wakes up with that. So here we're talking about future existential threat, and over there, the bulk of humanity basically is leading a hard scrabble life, you know, amazing people, brilliant in every way, but, you know, they do not have privilege. They do not have the benefits of that we share. And so if we're not doing that, then to me, we're not serious about the problem. You know, we're thinking about ourselves. We may not see that, you know, but we are. That's what we're not thinking about the whole of the world.
We were talking about the difference between drawdown and regeneration, and I appreciated near the end of the book on this topic of equity, where you even said that there's certain people that need to have a larger footprint, a larger carbon footprint, you know, so we can get there.
One of my regrets in Drawdown is that the education of girls, okay, that was my idea, okay, and I got it from Gene Sperling, and I forget the Girl Rising, Gene Sperling, and another woman, okay, not my idea. But I thought, well, let's get that in there. And then Chad, with all due respect, I mean, you know, basically said, nah. And I said, no, it's there. And then we had another woman working with us who said, here's the data, you know. And we put it in, and we didn't really know exactly how to separate it from family planning, but you put girls' education and family planning together, and you have, the fact is that when girls are allowed to become a woman, if not entirely, mostly on their own, as opposed to being told what to do and be, they make different choices, and their choices to have to be more educated and have smaller families and give more resources to their children. I mean, and the boys and girls that are born to mothers like that repeat that pattern. And so we're just looking at what the impact would be of the 145 million girls that are excluded from school for various and sundry reasons, went to school, and that has a huge impact. And so we measured that, and it became the 6th and 7th solution, you know, in Drawdown. People loved it, and they got big applause lines, you know, when I gave talks, you know, and if you combine them, it's the #1 solution, all that sort of stuff. But in Regeneration, I didn't model it at all. I said, wait a minute, whoa. Education is a human right, period. And when we model it by emissions or reduction in emissions, it's the same colonial mindset, you know, like whose emissions? And actually, most of those 145 million young girls deserve to have more. And the idea that somehow, if they're educated, they'll help us offset our emissions, it just seemed. And so that's my biggest regret about Drawdown, was that decision not to include it, but to actually try to reduce it into carbon dioxide metrics. I think that was inappropriate. No.
Paul, we're going to run out of time, but so I'm going to pick up the pace a little bit. We talked a little bit about education. You know, how does education need to prepare for regeneration, and how are you participating in that?
Well, I mean, education is an artifact of industrialism. I mean, that's what it is. And this idea that children learn well if they're in a row, in a line, on time, inside, you know, studying from books, you know, or tablets or, you know, screens right now, is bizarre, because we know better. That's not how human beings learn. But the education we have is meant to create uniformity. It was meant to create workers. It was meant to create people that were fungible in the sense of functionally. And we're still doing that in a world that wants imagination, innovation, creativity, you know, and you see these kids that are homeschooled, and not kids are adults and so forth, and it's just amazing, you know, and so forth. And I can name a bunch of them, you know, and so to me, education begins when you go outside, you know, not inside. And so we know that experiential learning is the most powerful learning there is. And what we need is And I think what children want too, if they had the choice, is to learn things that have real world application to a world that is suffering, that is actually on the verge, of a future that is not helpful at all to them and to people here right now. And I just feel that, in youth, and they're frustrated because we don't listen to them. But in Regeneration, there's a people section, and I wrote the intro to it, but as I did most of the book. But I mean, on that one, I said that if we want to know what to do, listen to the people who pay the highest price. And that's the localized poor, that's children, indigenous people and women. Okay, go talk to them. If we listen, we'll know exactly what to do.
You want to share your news about UC Irvine?
Sure. I was invited to talk to James Bullock, the Dean of Physical Sciences, and by Julie Hill, who's the chairman of the trustees, and Steve Davis and Richard Matthew and a couple other professors, and Barbara Finlays and Finlays and Pitt. Oh, anyway, I'm sorry. Anyway, but just about regeneration, and the talks went really well. We had a great time and a lot of laughter, a lot of, ahas and sharing. And then out of that came this idea that actually would apply to the whole world, at least to all young people, which is they describe a campus that has one of the best science departments in North America, no question about it, who has, won Nobel Prizes, the only, I think, university to win a Nobel Prize for climate science, Jerry Rowland and I think Mario Molina and so forth. And, but the kids are being educated with great science, and the science about what's happening, what's going wrong, how fast it's going wrong, the fact that it's going south, if you will, sooner than predicted and projected, is making them depressed, making them anxious, making them worried, making them want to give up. Just, it's not pleasant. And so what we're talking about is actually a university that continues to do that, of course, but to add to that possibilities, because what they're learning right now is the probabilities of what's going to go wrong, when, and how, and the impacts it'll be. And that's great science, and not to be denied in any way, to be taken very seriously. But they're young, and what they need to know is what's possible given where we are right now. And so they're talking about creating a Regeneration Institute, perhaps. I think they might there in the new School of Interdisciplinary Studies. But what they're talking about is creating, whatever this is called is irrelevant. What they're talking about is a culture of optimism. In other words, to create a culture there, and to try to start it there and spread it to all the UC campuses, which is the biggest university system in the world, and to, again, it's kind of like a pivot, Dave, I mean, it's like, it's not a degen to regen, but it is in a way, because you're studying degeneration, and the facts of it, the impacts, the numbers, and the metrics, and the causes as a student. But why not also look at regeneration and what's possible, and what can we do now, in all levels of society, from the inner city, to the oceans, and from favelas, to forests. I mean, it doesn't matter. Regeneration applies to everything. And there's a lot of enthusiasm. And I met with the trustees last week. There's 71 of them. Oh my gosh. And I thought, I'm going to Orange County. These trustees must be, kind of conservative. And they were just they were the nicest people ever. And I didn't ask anybody who they voted for. I just talked about children and life and possibility, and they were just so responsive. So I think something's going to come of it.
That's wonderful. It's really exciting, Paul, and it is a unifier. The possibility of a better way of living is a real unifier. I think that might be a little bit of why that group, there seemed like a shared value there. And it's funny because I love hearing you talk about education. I feel like, I'm sure that many people listening today feel like that. Certainly architecture education, there have been a lot of efforts in recent years to try to make bigger changes in that realm, and just education generally. There's so much opportunity for a improvement along the number of the ways that you're mentioning. I wanted to ask you, though, you have said that we should love this place as a starting point to addressing the crisis. And it comes up a couple of times in the book, and I've heard you mention it on podcasts. And it really touched something with me. In Women in Green, the book I wrote with Lance Hosey, we have a chapter called How Do We Love More? And it's really resonant, I think, in a lot of the conversations that we're having now about, it was in All We Can Save and other books. There's a big push towards caring for and creating the place and knowing it better, right? You touched on this just a second ago about indigeneity. And I'm just wondering if you can talk about what love and loving, perhaps models of collaborating might have to do with the next steps for us towards regeneration.
Well, I mean, the axiom is you protect what you love, and so you can't love something if you don't know it, don't understand it, haven't seen it, haven't experienced it, or see it in a way that's actually incorrect. I mean, incorrect in the sense you don't understand it. And so the gift of indigeneity is observational science of place, which is they know where they live, and most people don't. And they say, oh no, they have their address. Okay, that's not where you live. That's your address. Where you live has to do with, native fauna, native plants, migratory birds, the pollinators, I mean, the Lepidoptera, I mean, it goes on and on and on. That's where you live. And also where you live is probably unceded lands, that belong to cultures that were extirpated or nearly extirpated by settlers and colonists and so forth. So, but the thing is, again, about being outside, about knowing that and knowing we have this, extraordinary interdependence on this, and starting right with the soil itself. And to me, the solutions, for addressing the climate crisis are all in community, all in agency, all in locality, all in place. I mean, it doesn't mean I don't want, an administration like the Biden administration or the Conference of Parties to wildly succeed. But so waiting for that is like waiting for Godot, I mean, okay. I mean, it hasn't happened so far, but maybe it will. But we need to do something now that is meaningful and to us. And there's a wonderful story in the book that was about the Wetlands Initiative. It's in Illinois, and there was this farm they bought, that was tiled with, to drain it so that you could plant corn. It's a big corn farm. And they bought it, the Wetland Initiative, because there used to be lakes there. And they took out all the pipes that were putting in 9 million gallons of water every day into the Illinois River. And within 6 months, they had the Hopper and Hennepin lakes filled up. And I was about 15 years later, this wetland, they had a weekend where they had teachers and docents and scientists and students and so forth, all going around and identifying all the different species that lived there. And it was, I think, 915, if my number is, but it was over 900. And the only species that were there that had been placed there were the lakes were stocked with fish. Okay, they brought them in. Everything else came in by itself. And and the joy and the activities and the things that come out of this is more than a park, it's a wetland and so forth, are just extraordinary. And people have the pride, and the satisfaction of creating it and maintaining it and learning from it and teaching from it. And I feel like it's just emblematic of what we've lost, we've lost that connection, and the last part of the book is called Action and Connection, because in a way you could look at global warming and the cause of it, not in a way, I think it is the fundamental cause, and that is a profound disconnection, between each other, for sure, between people, religions and cultures and races and ethnicities, but also between us and nature, profound disconnection. And the activity of disconnected nature from itself by habitat fragmentation and acidification of oceans, and obviously pesticides and chemicals and poisons and burning, and but so to me, when we think of love, what is love? And for most people, if they're honest, it can be rather fickle. You know, oh, I used to, I was in love, I fell out of love, all that sort of stuff. But actually, the core meaning to me is synonymous with beauty. You know what I mean? And the beauty of human beings at their core, the beauty of the living world, the beauty of this place, this miraculous place we get to live in for a relatively short time, and its kindness, and the Wetland Initiative, and what Isabella Tree did in Sussex in England, and so many other places, is that this world wants to heal itself and will heal itself so quickly. And so really, I mean, this is basically we're being homeschooled, you know, by the earth. This is homeschooling. I mean, that's what's going on. It's feedback saying, and lesson plan number 1 is to get in alignment with biology, with life itself. And that goes back to the definition of regeneration, which is to put life at the center of every act and decision. And to me, you know, what the thing about the synonymity of beauty with love is that it's absolutely universal on the planet. You know, what is beautiful, and awe and wonder, you know, in every culture, every people. And so that is what we have as a connection. And so, and as Gary Snyder said, stop feeling guilty, stop feeling ashamed. Don't go into this with, you know, all those emotions, you know, actually, you know, fall in love with the world, you know, and love is the emotion actually that will inform and take you through the rest of your life in a way that is truly, truly fulfilling.
Our friend Leslie Alden sent in a question, and hi Leslie. She says, recognizing that people do not respond to things that do not touch them personally, family and community, and that as species we're not wired to respond to existential threats. How do you suggest that we approach this conundrum and engage the first world to care about what happens to the rest of the world? And I'll add to that, COP26 is coming up in November, Paul. I'll take Leslie's question and I'll frame it. What if regeneration was front and center at COP26?
Yeah, what if it was, except what COP26 is about is something else, you know, and it's very much molded and shaped by the IPCC, the UN Framework on Climate Change. And I mean, you have to remember that, you know, the IPCC reports didn't even hardly mention nature, except don't cut down trees until the 5th assessment. I mean, and then they use the term nature-based, which I find really sort of odd, you know, as if we aren't nature, it's out there somewhere, you know. But the first thing I'd say with Leslie, who I know and I respect very much, is stop calling it a conundrum. It's not a conundrum. The systemic continuity of the world is, you can't find a boundary, you can't find a line, you can't divide. Dividing is the problem because you other it, you know, and not to say there is no world of privilege that has tremendous income and, you know, makes a lot of money and has, you know, owns most of the world. It's true, of course that's true, and so forth. But the way to understand it is a little different than saying, well, can the first world wake up and, you know, save, you know, what, the rest of the world or the localized poor. That's what we've been trying to do that for a long time too. And that's wrong, because poverty does not want to be fixed. Poverty wants to fix itself. And just like life creates the conditions conducive for life, we want to create the conditions for self-organization. Poverty, you know, people who are quote, quote, poor work their buns off. They're incredible. They're smart. They know so much, you know. They just want the tools and the means, you know, to change and improve in their lives. So if we look at the climate solutions, and in the website, regeneration.org, is the most complete listing and network of climate solutions. But what's different about it and Drawdown is how to get them done. Not what can be done, how to do it. And those solutions, if you look at them just from a different perspective, if you look at them from a perspective of somebody who is clueless about extreme weather or climate scientists, or if we didn't have such a thing in the world as climatology, you look at them and go, yeah, we should do that. Oh, that's good. Well, that's a very, very good idea. Oh, this has cascading benefits to people, to water, to children, to income, and this is a great job. This, every one of them is something we would want to do. And so again, there's this idea that somehow, well, we've got to focus on climate. We do, but basically, if we focus on the biosphere, because again, nature doesn't make a mistake, we do, we're the ones, the cause. If we focus on it, then the outcome is reversing global warming. If we just focus on climate, we are in a sense doing what the term first world does, and that which is to create a division, which is as if climate was out there somewhere and we're othering it, when in fact there's no it there. There's just this biosphere that goes from solid to gaseous, and we call the gaseous part atmosphere and the solid part, the biosphere. That's just words. But every astronaut looks at it and goes, oh my God, like, holy smokes, I come from there. That's my home. Yeah.
Paul, we have a question from Marianne Lazarus. She's wanting us to flip back to the education piece just real quickly. She says, I so appreciate your focus on younger people who will bear the brunt of our inaction while maintaining a positive approach. Is there an educational approach that is or could be part of this, especially for K-12?
I missed the first part of your question because my internet connection was unstable, but I heard you were talking. So can you just repeat the first part again?
Yes, it's really just about, the younger people are going to bear the brunt of our inaction. So we're trying to maintain a positive approach. And her question is really about how can we bring that into K-12 in particular? Sort of looking at reshaping education at the K-12 level.
Yeah, I mean, that's what UCI is talking about too, not K-12, obviously 12 plus, but it's the same problem, which is that the way to teach K-12 about climate is to first teach them about wonder, awe, and we have to be careful that we don't, in a sense, create, a sense of harm, a sense of fear, a sense of threat in young children, And I'm sorry about my internet connection. I have no idea what's causing that. But anyway, it's Comcast, so that's just want to give responsibility where it belongs. But the K-12 education is what we talked about. It's industrial education, and so we're educating kids to be extractors. It's an assumptive product of it, and it's in there, it's underlying. No one ever uses the word, but that's what we're teaching our children to be, and that's who we look up to, social media and influencers and people who, that's who we point to. All our media points to it, and we don't point to people who have hearts as big as the moon, like Janine, and others, and so, I mean, we are off course, and the good news, I think, is that the climate movement will become the biggest movement on Earth ever. And the reason it will be is because of weather. And so I see things that we're talking about today, things that I think virtually everybody who's on the call today, what we do, what we practice, what we strive for, we are rehearsing the future. That's what we're doing. You say, well, not enough people. No, it's not happening fast enough. No. I agree. And yet, when things change and people irrevocably understand, oh my God, they were right. they understood this earlier, not right or wrong, and then who are we going to turn to? Which farmers are we going to turn to? Which people in terms of understanding buildings, I mean, really, the living environment, the built environment, who are we going to turn to? Who are we going to turn to when more and more people understand that their life depends on things that they took for granted and or actually And so I wish it was otherwise. I wish we had foresight, we didn't. But, Kira, when I learned about this at Stanford Research Institute in the 70s, climate does global warming, and there was amazing people there, really amazing. But we all kind of nodded sadly to each other about it and said, I don't think people are going to do anything until it becomes experiential instead of conceptual. And that's exactly what happened. Yeah.
Paul, we have an interesting question from Gina Siganik. How did you listen to women and those with little means as part of your book? And how did it shape your thoughts and words?
Well, maybe just give me that question again, because if you don't mind, Kira. It's from Gail. Who's that from?
Gina Siganik gave us that question. She's the CEO of the Healthy Building Network.
Okay, good. And the question was?
Yes, it's how did you listen? You had mentioned earlier about the importance of listening to women and those with less means. And she wondered if you could explain a little bit about how you listened to women and those with little means as part of the book, your work on the book and your thinking on the book, and how that might have shaped your thoughts and words.
Well, you can see the women that are in the book to see, who I listen to, and Hindu, Amaru, Ibrahim, and Namante Nemquino, and Mimi Castile, and others, and their words are there. So to me, it was just a matter of getting some sort of balance here in terms of the narrative, and I felt like the narrative has been dominated by my gender. And it's very much about we're going to fix it, which we can, technology. And I'm going, well, hang on there, dog. And so that's one. Second, I did it by how we made up the organization. So 70% of the board are women, 50% are BIPOC, 30% are Indigenous, and the co-chairs are women, and the new ED, Samantha Wright, is a woman, and so forth. So, and I didn't do this to be cool or progressive. I did it functionally because I feel like I want a functional organization that can really get things done in the world and speak to it in a way that makes sense. And so that was the same with our researchers, the same, very closely, actually, proportion of different categories of people, gender and otherwise, were there. And that is, Ben Zander taught me a long time ago. He's the conductor of the Boston Symphony, and he said, leadership is about hearing all the voices, and which we don't. And so to me, regeneration is about having nobody can do all, but to representatively hear all the voices, and then faithfully reflect them to the world as a whole, in a way that wasn't biased.
Hey, Paul, this question might allow us to talk a little bit about the Nexus section of the website and the buildings. We're letting people vote on questions as well if they think that these are important questions. So this one got the most votes so far. It's from Ralph Bricknazy. He says, Paul, thank you for all that you are doing to significantly move the needle on climate action and in regeneration. The AIA is also working on moving the needle. Buildings have a huge impact on operational embodied carbon. What's one or more suggestions that you would make to the AIA to guide their members to effective climate action, especially to incite those fence sitters to action?
To let SERA lead the AIA. Affordable low-cost housing that is mass timber and, with very, very little, a lot of embodied carbon, but, we know where to go in the built environment, but we also have to really think about it in terms of basically the existing built environment, and to electrify everything, to look at what we have as opposed to looking for hope in the new buildings. I mean, they're incredible, some of the new buildings right now, but most of the buildings are going to be here in 50 years or 30 years. And so what are we going to do with those buildings and for those people? And I think that Saul Griffith's work on Electrify and this and look at the data, and he's a data hound if I ever saw one, and
Right.
And we call it Electrify Everything, but it's really based on his work, no question about it. And basically, we can defossil fuel, every building, in the world, and then use less energy, which is not just a swap for renewables, and take away the fossil fuels, coal, gas, and oil. It's actually swap it out, and your energy use goes down by half, So. And so to me, retrofits is really where the action is. It's not as glamorous as, a new building, and those got to be put up. I mean, you guys and Berkebile at BNIM and others, I mean, I can name put up some astoundingly beautiful buildings that are so really well engineered and designed. And those are inspiring, and we have to take care of all the other people, for example, in Kansas City, who are living in houses that were poorly designed, or apartments, and, they were poorly designed and poorly insulated and were designed at a time of cheap energy.
Yeah, I would just encourage people to spend time on the website and explore. I know that you're adding so much content all the time, and the Nexus section on buildings was phenomenal. Thank you for putting that together. I look forward to more on the Nexus. Can you spend, because it's in the website and it's in the book, this idea about a punch list and how you're encouraging this as a way to frame our actions? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I think all of us are the same. We know that between 98 and 99% of all people on Earth are disengaged from doing anything. Now you have to say, "Oh, come on, Paul." No, it's true. And about half of those are actually sympathetic or empathetic to the science and to the fact that global warming is here and it's having impact on weather, food, water, etc. And still they don't do anything. And a lot of people feel like their sympathy is doing something, and so the thing about a punch list, and one of them is mine, by the way. I did the first punch list. One of the thing about punch list is you actually sit down and write your commitments. It can be for a month, a year, 5 years. It can be you as an individual or a family. It can be your school, your class, your church, your synagogue, your temple, your company, your city. I mean, the punch list can be on any level of agency and and whatever time scale makes sense to you. And you say, this is what I'm committed to doing. And what I'm hoping is, as people fill out the punch list and you see more and more of them, that you start to see the diversity of things that engage people. We say in the book, people say to me, "Well, what should I do?" I say, "I have no idea. I don't know you." But I do know the thing you're going to do best is what lights you up. And so Nexus is about finding that area where you're curious, or you know a lot already, but didn't think it was important, and now it is, or whatever reason it is, you love to do it and get engaged with it, or learn more about it, or teach more about it, or support it. And that's what you should do. And the punch list is not just like, I mean, I went to catechism. I was a Catholic. I was an altar boy. I was, shrouded and drenched in guilt every week. This isn't about guilt. This isn't about shame. This isn't about obligation. This is about really leading a really amazing life, And that punch list is to say, yeah, this is what I want to do. And it turns you on when you see it. It's not like, oh my God, I committed to this, I got to go do it. And so I'm hoping that when people see each other's punch list, they're inspired,
Yeah.
As opposed to, the top 10, which is silly.
Paul, this was the fastest hour of my week. We just, obviously there's so much more that we all need to do. From all of us, Paul, I just want to express the deepest gratitude for all that you do and all that you bring. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I say one more thing?
Yes, you may, please.
Okay, and that is that about regeneration and it bringing the planet back to life brings us back to life. And I mean, you say, well, I am, okay, great. But most of the world is not. Most of people feel a sense of a lack of purpose, of meaning. They don't feel that their jobs have dignity. And when we look at what regeneration encompasses and upholds and supports and creates, what we're talking about is creating meaning and dignity and purpose for all of us together, which is very different than, say, sustainability or, meeting 15C, like who wakes up and saying, I can't wait to mitigate today. No one wakes up and saying, oh, I can't, and so this is about bringing global warming and its causes, but the actions that are going to effectively change it. Home is the heart. Home is a hearth. Home is our family. Home is our network. Is our friends. Is our family. Is where we worship, where we pray, where we honor, where we walk, where we go, where we love. That's regeneration. And so that's what I'm trying to say. It's us, and that's what's so powerful about it.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
And the thing is, okay, you're recording, that's fine.
I'm sorry, I was going to keep it going then.
That's okay, that's fine. But the thing is, if you notice in the beginning of the book, and you talked about equity and protect, and we didn't get into protect, sequester and protect, and
we
didn't get into that. Okay. But the point being is that you could easily say in a book like this, like, ladies and gentlemen, it's all connected, and like the ham bone's connected to the bone. I mean, and I didn't do that, because it's just a sad new age cliche from systems theory that is true, but you just go right. And so what I tried to do in the book, in the writing of it, was within the solutions, is to make connections that people might not have known.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow, really? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And small, not, the universe. And so that we're talking about this, Kira, about the conditions conducive. So what is that conducive to? You're creating conditions in the book conducive to people making up their own mind. And at some point on page 162 saying, man, it's all connected. I've already heard that. Like, I didn't get that before, So that is, they own that now, as opposed to, well, so-and-so says, it's all connected, it makes sense, but it's conceptual, it's completely conceptual, and to try not to change people's minds, to create the spaciousness for people to make up their own minds, because they're going to do it anyway. And
it's so powerful, Paul. It's really powerful. And it's related to that educational concept that you were discussing, which is, it's like opening people to the knowledge rather than telling them the knowledge, right? Like it's an entirely different transaction.
Well, you saw AY, that video of AY singing, together we can change the world. He's singing it in Milan tonight for, 10,000 people. Okay, his mother is a state senator in Missouri, and his father is a teacher at a university or college. He was homeschooled. And so you see the joy, the creativity. What you saw is what you get, by the way. It's not like, oh, he was performing.
Right.
He wasn't performing at all. That's AY. And I've been around enough to know, oh my God, can you imagine if he'd gone through 12 grades, who would he be, I don't know, he'd still be AY in some deep sense of the word, but I don't think he would have been the artist he is today, And just from that song you saw on the website, you know, Down to Earth, Darren Olian is going to use that song for the second season of Down to Earth. You know?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's really.
When you the person that wrote the afterword, Damon, how do you pronounce Damon's last name?
Gamo.
Gemo.
Gamo,
And
yeah.
then you quote from him, you said, this was, I wish we would, there's so much that's underlined in my book that we didn't get to, but he says, he discovered a direct way to create a more effective system. You push the power of decision-making out to the periphery and away from the center. You give people room to adapt based on their experience and expertise. All you ask is that people talk to one another and take responsibility. I wish we could all act that way. Wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, isn't that a great quote? I mean,
Yeah.
I love it. And yeah, it's so opposite of what we do, really, you know, the way we organize and people and events and things. And but that's where it's going. That's where it has to go. You know, I have a lot of faith in human beings, I know, which it's hard to support if you doom scroll, you know.
Yeah.
How could anybody be so crazy? But not if you just talking to human beings, you know. And I was on Indigo. I was on a live event for all these journalists for Indigo Ag, and Ben Menchie from Iowa is a farmer, 6th generation farmer. And he was talking about what he does and so forth, and really nice guy. And he's converted 25% of his farm to sort of regenerative, and he's getting carbon credits for it and stuff like that. And it's so interesting. And then he was talking about, you know, corn soy rotation and, you know, the cost of inputs and this and that, and, you know, on the other 75%, all of it really, you know. I'm going, okay, well. And then after it was over, he said, oh, I'm really looking forward to reading your book and so forth. And I said, great. I said, you may not like it all, you know, because I go hard on industrial ag and big food. And he wrote back, he said, I forget how he said, no, back up. He said, and then he went after big ag and big food and said, you know, I said, I would rather farm the way my grandfather farmed. He knew what he was doing. We are boxed in by, and I feel like, you know, just people know a lot more than they're being allowed to say or think it's okay to say, or, you know. I remember when I did that thing for Walmart, you know, and that speech for Lee Scott in 2005, you know, which became famous. But Lee had called me, and they had done 30 rounds or versions of the speech, and they were just getting worse. And he asked me to write the speech, and I said, well, give me the content. And I wrote him back in 20 minutes, said, there's no content. No wonder there's no speech, there's no content, you know. And that's when he said, well, just Paul, write the speech I should give. And I kept saying, I said, you really serious? He said, yeah, just write the speech I should give. And so I did, and I just threw everything in there, you know, rise the minimum wage, 100%, you know, renewable energy, you know, zero waste, you know. And he gave the speech against the wishes of every single person in management except Doug McMillan. And what happened though, it just unleashed or gave permission for the people who work at Walmart to feel like it was safe now to talk about their child's asthma and air pollution, the environment and energy. And, you know, I mean, and there was right there, you know, but people didn't feel they had permission, you know, to, you know, they're mostly in more or less in red states or red areas, you know, of the country. Yeah. So.
Hey, Paul, we still have 45 people on. This is like the after party.
Oh, yeah.
And Girlfriend asked this question, and a lot of people were hoping it would get asked. And it was the culture of optimism sure beats a culture of doom and despair, which seems to me the ultimate statement of privilege. But maybe better than optimism, which can sound like wishful thinking, is hope, commitment, and solidarity. What do you think?
Well, hi, Gil. Yeah, first of all, in my Buddhist background, we don't use the word hope because hope is the mask for fear. You can't have hope without fear. Or what are you hopeful for? You're hopeful for something that doesn't happen. Well, then you're afraid of something happening. And so I use the word fearless and courageous is more interesting to me, which is the Wendell Berry quote, "Be joyous though you've considered all the facts." In other words, got it. Thank you. Wow, you scientists nailed it. Now I'm going to go work on the solutions. I'm going to go to work, and so I'm not a big fan of pronouncements in any sort of way. Like the culture of optimism is what Julie came up with. I don't know what they're going to do, what they're going to name it. Bright tomorrow. There's different names banding about. What matters to me is that the school is going to change the curriculum. That's what matters to me, not the title, the name of it, which is about the possibilities and how to be a hands-on person given where we are as you're a student and as you graduate. That's the change that I think is needed, and that's what I think young people want, is they want to know what they can do and how to do it, and to be equipped with the knowledge and the capacity and ability to do so. Yeah. What else you got there going, Clark?
There was
Gil
another
says-
question. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, Gil says, I get it regarding hope. What's optimism the mask for?
I didn't coin that term. I'm just telling you what you didn't hear me use that word.
Okay, but there was a question that got upvoted a lot right near the end that we didn't get to ask it. It's from David Posada, who actually works at SERA.
Right.
And he said, thank you for your inspiring both thoughtfulness and action. Does watching how the US has responded to the more immediate existential threat of COVID change how you're thinking about what we need to do or how we need to go about doing it?
Well, the COVID response, or lack thereof in some cases, but let's say the overall response is emblematic of what I was talking about the climate movement becoming the biggest movement on Earth. Because as long as it's conceptual, it'll be brushed aside, I think. And the interesting thing about the sixth assessment is that the timing was rather good, in the sense that the Northern Hemisphere was on fire, Siberia, Greece, Spain, California, Oregon, Washington, Canada, and in several cases, fires that were so big that you couldn't put them out. And so that, to me, was a teachable moment. And I think it was for a lot of people. How many? I don't know, but I do feel like there was an inflection point and shift. But I think there's deeper shifts going on right now too. And, it goes back to what I didn't say this earlier, but Andrew Huberman's work at Stanford about beliefs and actions. And we have this belief that in itself, that if we change people's beliefs, they'll act. And it's not true. And we know why that's not true now from neurobiology, neuroscience, but we do know now that if people act, it changes their beliefs. It's a figure ground shift. And if you act, you change other people's beliefs too, which is, you're not trying to change your beliefs now. You're just acting. You're doing. And so Regeneration is very much a do book, and that's why Nexus is the most complete how-to when it's finished. Listing a network of climate solutions in the world. We take them from wherever we can get them. By the way, all the Drawdown ones, the Regen ones are there, and some others. And we keep adding all the time. And there are challenges too. The most important challenges, like the boreal plastics, food apartheid, those are challenges. Obviously if you address them properly, they become solutions, but they're not innately solutions. And so really, I mean, the clarion call of regeneration is, and it goes back to the punch list, Dave. You know, let's just do it. Make the punch list. Now go do it. Not like put it on your refrigerator with the magnets, you know, no, that's fine. But if you're not doing it, then it's just a piece of paper. And I think that's the movement we need, as opposed to sort of worrying about what others aren't doing or what they should be doing or what they'll be doing that's really inappropriate. And or looking to large institutions that by all rights should be acting in our behalf and do not. And
Right.
as if we're confused about corruption, you know, it's corruption. It's pure and
Hey,
simple.
Paul, I've got a question from me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, in Clark, today, Patrick Doherty and I were asked if we would contribute to an annual economic assessment for the state of California. And it was mostly around regenerative walkable communities and some of the work that we're doing, Paul. And I've really felt like you mentioned the sixth assessment, and there was a turning point in July. You could almost name the date where the polarity changed. It did for me from this, and I'm interested about how you see capital markets being an agent for change, or do you? How do we channel that?
I do, partly because they're being embarrassed by Rainforest Action Network, you know, doing the work on the, you know, $3.8 trillion that was loaned to fossil fuel companies, loaned or invested since the Paris Agreement by JP Morgan, you know, by Goldman Sachs, by Wells Fargo, by Bank of America. You know, probably you have a credit card in your wallet that's destroying the world from one of those banks. So, and then also then highlighting the subsidies that came from governments to fossil fuel companies, you know, in terms of tax breaks and other things at the 3.3 trillion, so $7.1 trillion going in from, you know, that time. So that's embarrassment, that's shaming, you know, and so forth. And it's not shaming, it's just shameful. If you look at it and go, what are you doing? What were you thinking? And all you're thinking about is making more money. The odd thing in the book, as I talk about, is that it didn't. It's actually a piss poor investment. It's been a piss poor investment since Bill McKibben started the divestment movement in 2011 with Ellen Dorsey. I mean, and if you look, if you just shifted your portfolio then to, you know, blue chip solar and wind companies then, and got out of whatever fossil fuel companies you were in, you can name it, you would have killed it. And, you know, so what you have is a financial system that has inertia, you know, tremendous momentum inertia. It's an old boy. Yes, I know there's women involved with it now, but I mean, it's still an old boy network. And so it's self-reinforcing, you know, reinforces, you know, they're breathing their own exhaust is the only way you can put it, you know, that makes sense. And so there's that. Then there is this big transfer. I mean, it goes on every day, but I mean, there's a generational transfer of wealth. And it's in the trillions of dollars. And
Concentration.
yeah, and that's concentrated wealth. But you're seeing more money right now trying to chase, you know, good climate investments than you've ever seen. And it's just
44 trillion.
Yeah, well, I've seen that number. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's a lot of ESG stuff. But yeah, money wants to move to something that is not, you know, it's embarrassing to itself. And so you're seeing that. I mean, Lorene Powell jobs, you know, I mean, I forget, she doesn't say, but between 28 and 34 billion. I know she wants to spend down, you know, that money in her lifetime on climate or some portion of it. You're seeing with the Walton children, the grandchildren, you're seeing it, you know, I mean, the Rockefellers have been, the kids have been there a long time, so that's not a new thing. But you're seeing it again and again and again, you know, so you're seeing financing, shifting control, who's getting control. And then I think the younger the people are, the more clearly they see the world, you know, and want to do something with the resources they have at hand.
Paul, we're going to close. Tell us, keep us surprised. Let us know what more we can do to help. And I
it's-
really appreciate this.
Yeah, stay in touch and you know, read the book and if you have criticisms or things you think should change or you want to add to Nexus or you think of a category in Nexus, it should be there, for example, you know, this missing, you know, please do, you know, make it collaborative. You know, this whole the website ultimately is meant to be a collaboration, not meant to be, you know.
Yeah. We didn't touch agency enough. That's my, you know, that was a big spot to miss, but.
You know, we had fun though. I had fun.
It was great. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you,
Kira.
Paul.
Thank you so much for being such a beautiful interlocutor. And you, Dave, and Giselle. I know you're there, you know. Even
Here.
She
if
is.
you're hiding.
Thank you, Giselle. Thank you, Clark. Thank you, Paul. Thank
Yeah.
you, Dave.
Thank you, Clark. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for everyone who stayed on for the after party.
Yeah,
Yeah.
hugs all around to our 44 participants that are still hanging in there.
Yeah, yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.